pressure looks good. Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Ego Delta nominal.
Flight down, feed off. Bring in, and feed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks, you know the drill. Help me out. Please tell me you can hear us. You know how it is. Zoom calls, geez, how do they work? Sometimes they don't. But we are here for another exciting episode of NASA Spaceflight Live. NSF Live, our weekly show. I'm looking at the chat. I'm looking for some 5x5s. It looks like y'all can hear me, because wouldn't it be embarrassing if I was just here talking to nothing? It is time for another NSF Live. Like I said, since you can hear us, we have a super special episode today. This one's going to be a lot of fun. You can tell it's going to be fun because I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
Yes.
That's how you know. We have a super special guest today. Over here, Chris, you are going to do the entire intro, but I want everybody to give a warm NASA Spaceflight welcome to Jean Wright. Jean worked on the shuttle program for a very, very long time, sewing all sorts of different thermal protection systems, blankets, and stuff like that. So we'll get into that in just a second. Jean, thank you so much for joining us here.
It's sweet for you guys to invite me. Thank you. Thank
Excellent. You. And Chris, we also have Chris Gebhardt out. How exciting is that? Chris is here like half the time, so
I know.
You don't know how to get too excited about it. It's really Jean that we want to talk to here today. But we will be doing the show live. You've probably seen these before. If you have questions for us over the course of the show, tag us in chat at NASASpaceflight. We will have the opportunity to ask some of the questions here to Jean all about space shuttles and thermal protection systems and how they handmade some of these things or use these massive sewing machines and stuff. But that's going to be what we're talking about here today. Again, very special guest, Jean Wright. Oops, I pointed the wrong way. Jean Wright is on this side. And let's go ahead. See, you can help me. Yes, point to yourself. Chris, get us started here. Like, tell us a little bit about the shuttle and the thermal protection systems and how did they? Yeah, all right, everybody get comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say that's our whole 90-minute show.
How did they actually make those things? Go ahead.
Yes, well, this is why I have wanted to have you on the show for a while, Jean, because if anyone out there in our chat has been wondering about thermal protection system, has had questions about how it works or the different ways or the different kinds of thermal protection, boy, is this the show for you. Jean, you had an incredible career in the thermal protection system division, working on the shuttle program, not just the blankets, but a lot of portions of the thermal protection system that we never hear about, but that are very critical. So honestly, my first question to you is, can you tell us about your career and the job that you had in general, and then we'll deep dive into some of the nitty-gritty questions about the TPS.
Show a picture of what the building looks like that I worked in. That's the thermal protection facility right there.
You have to use the acronym though. The
TPSF, Thermal Protection Systems Facility.
Because the first time we talked about it, you just said, "Oh, that's the TPSF," and I was like, "What did she say?" And I was like, Thermal Protection System. What's the F?
You know how it is with NASA acronyms. We're guilty of that. Oh, we're so guilty of that.
Excellent.
But tell us a little bit about your career, Jean, because this is a picture of you working on one of the orbiters, like hand installing something on one of the orbiters. So tell us about your career and everything.
Oh gosh, I tell you, the story I talk about is from the time I was a little girl. I always wanted to be out there, and I honestly had no idea. Everybody talks about math and science, and you don't hear about the people who work with their hands. And it's an art form. I mean, sewing's been around for thousands of years, so even now it still blows my mind that we need something as basic as sewing to do complicated sewing that we did on vehicles, whether they're crewed or uncrewed. We still need sewing. And so I put my job interview, my application, and I didn't hear anything for 6 months. And I tweaked my my resume, excuse me. And that was in January. And about 2 weeks later, there was a caller ID that said Kennedy Space Center. And I thought, oh, someone's being jerking my chain. This is just a joke, But it was calling me for an interview. And I had an interview. It was an hour and a half long in front of 3 different people. I knew of thermal protection, but I didn't know all the quite phrases. So literally, while I was waiting to find out anything, I got on the computer and studied everything I could about thermal protection. so I could get all the phrases right and everything else. So I had the interview, and after my interview, it was in front of 3 different people. They invited me to go out to the TPSF and to meet the ladies, and I thought that was the courtesy they gave everybody, just because they hadn't hired anybody in 9 years, and we had an opening that came open. And it was because one of the ladies had developed an allergy to the itchiness with all the fabric that we work with, and it happens. I would be itchy with it. And so she asked to be transferred, and otherwise there would never have been an opening. And I just happened to get my application, and it's just the right time. So I met the ladies, and 2 days later, my boss called and said, well, we decided we want you. He said, you brought such heart and passion. You knew so much about the shuttle program. And he said, you know, we went through a lot after losing Columbia and everything. And he says to me, this building needed heart, and I could see it in you. And that's why I wanted you. After the interview, he said to me, I told everybody in the room, you know, I know we have 3 other ladies to interview, but she's the one I want. We'll listen to the other ones, but she's the one I want. So I started on Valentine's Day, which I always say, which is a job I knew I would always love, would start on Valentine's Day. It was perfect. It was perfect.
I gotta ask.
Perfect.
Really, like, you go in and they're interviewing, and you were interviewing for the thermal protection system. Like, what did they call it? The thermal protection system.
We were
producer?
called, we're well, technically techs. It's a really weird name. It's called Aerospace Composite Techs is what our technical job position is. And I was good. I mean, thank God I've been sewing since I was 7 years old. I was made a senior tech within 9 months of being there, which is unheard of. But what I always thought was a compliment is when quality would inspect our work, they would say to me, we can always tell what is yours because your stitches are so nice and even and they're so perfect and your corners are so sharp. So they said, we don't even have to look at the part. We know that it's yours because I've been sewing forever.
So did you already, like, you were already sewing, you already knew how to sew, and did you go into this knowing that it was going to be heavily, like, sewing related?
Well, I hadn't worked with big commercial machines, and some of those were big. Yeah. The one thing that we had to know was to read a blueprint, because we had to, by looking at the blueprint, we had to draw our own, we had Mylar plastic that we would make our own patterns out of to make our parts. And I was fortunate enough that when I was growing up, we had the couple next door had no children, and they were the Hansfords, and she taught me how to sew, and her husband worked for General Motors and would leave blueprints laying around on the tables, and I would just study them. So I had a basic idea. I mean, of course, we go through on-the-job training when we get there and have to make stuff for quality and our everything and get everything bought so they know we know what we're doing. But yeah, the big machines were kind of scary, especially when their needles are about 9 inches long and you're afraid they're going to go through your hand.
Oh,
but yeah.
I had this picture in my head of these 3 NASA people interviewing you about how to sew thermal protection system. It's like, can you do a double loop back stitch or something? And I'm like, what would they even ask you?
There is a book, and it's a government standard book, and there's like 400 stitches and seams that we have a book. And so what they say, you need to sew a type 1 seam. That's a basic seam, but they had over 400 of those. And there's a book that you flip through, because some of the parts we made, the sides weren't straight up and down. They would come up and then drape back down. So that would be like a type 401 seam. So yes, there was a book that told us how many seams and what stitches we had to use.
Look, I'm going to bring that up really quickly, because that's one of the pillow gap fillers, right? And it's got some stitches on it, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the call out for that one, that's kind of unique, because that little bump that you see at the top is called sleeving. And the reason why it's gray is because in certain hot areas, we actually paint what they call emittance coating on it. And then we bake it in the oven, and it heat seals that emittance coating into the gap filler. We know that gap filler is going in a really hot area if it has emittance coating. But with that one, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, probably not, because the gap filler may be on the other side. The call out for that one was every time we took a stitch into the sleeving or the cording at the top, every inch we had to put a knot, a French knot, which is a little knot that you do by hand. And you have to, the quality is looking an inch, every inch where you put a stitch, actually about 2-3 stitches, then you have to do a knot. And the reason why we have to do that is sometimes in space, because the gap fillers are used not only for heat protection between the tile, the sleeving on the top is that white that you see between the tile. If you see white between the tile, that's what you're seeing, is that sleeving at the top. There's a chance sometimes that between all the buffeting coming home, that the threads would break. So to prevent what we call the banana peel effect, you had to put a knot every inch so that it would stop the stitch from peeling at that inch mark. And Quality was adamant about making sure that inch. I mean, they would put out a little scale ruler and measure every inch.
Because I think that's part of the thing, right? Like these portions of the thermal protection system were just exposed to so much of the aerodynamic forces, not just during not just during entry and landing, but there were portions of the shuttle's thermal protection system that got hotter on ascent than they did on entry, and experienced a lot more wind speed loads during liftoff. So it's fascinating how they had to design that simple little thing like a gap filler to withstand that.
And you're right, on ascent we had what we called sacrificial blankets on the thrusters. You'll see things falling down and people will panic, and we would go, oh, that's nothing. That's a sacrificial blanket covering a thruster. Those are supposed to drop off during launch.
Right.
Was it? Man. You said you could see
sacrificial is funny, but that's what we call them. Sacrificial.
You said you could see it between the tiles. Is this like an example of that? This was the gap filler?
Well, you see Steve Robinson, yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
So the little white, I guess this part right, I may not circle the right thing, but is that actually...
That's a flat one. That one's an Ames one. There's a two. The one that you showed was a pillow one. Yeah. That one, because that one has stuffing and sleeving. The one that Steve Robinson is pulling out is what we call an Ames gap filler. That's the one that's in the Smithsonian. It's the flat one. And all it is ceramic fabric covered with ceramic paint. And they're literally, we go down on those as thin as a notebook sheet of paper, and we'll staple 6 of those layers together. And once we go to 6 layers of Ames, then we have to go to a pillow gap filler. That's the difference. In the really thin areas, we put in Ames, and we literally would fill a gap as thin as a notebook sheet. Literally that thin between the tiles.
So between two tiles, like
between two tiles, we would go as thin as 1 sheet of notebook paper, or 1 Ames is that flat one. And that's what he's pulling out, or 2 Ames. Well, in that one, just 1, but he ended up pulling 2 Ames gap fillers out.
And I think this is
how. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is that it?
This is the Ames gap filler. Yeah.
Oh, you know how we make those is it's literally ceramic fabric, and we're painting the ceramic paint on it, and we have a little, what we call a little gauge. And Quality, after we paint it on and they dry, they'll take the gauge and stick it in there to make sure it's the right thickness. And again, we'll do up to 6 of those, and they're stapled together at the bottom. And once we have to go beyond 6 sheets, then again, we go to that fat one. Yeah, that's an Ames one that you have up there. That's an Ames. And like I said, that's the one Steve Robinson pulled off on 114. And it's on display at the Smithsonian. We were able to see it as soon as they took it off the shuttle. They took it to our building so we could look at it since we made it. And then from there, it went to NASA investigation. Wow. And then it went on to the Smithsonian. So it's on display at the Smithsonian right now.
That's very cool.
So before we kind of move on from this, can you go back to the previous picture?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is one of these things that fascinates me. So when it was realized that this thing was protruding out of the top of Discovery on her underside there on that mission, and we thought, okay, they want to go out and they want to have him pick this out. What did you all have to do on the ground to facilitate those sort of in-orbit repairs and everything?
Nope. Oh, we may have had the internet hiccup there. We were having internet hiccups on occasion, y'all, but give us just 1 second here. We'll see if we can get Jean back. Give us just 1 second. Chris, you got that?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, we're in a Wi-Fi situation, so for Jean, we may not have her back for just 1 second. We'll work on getting her video and audio back really quickly here, but one way or the other, we're not going anywhere. We knew that was going to be an issue out there today, but if you're just joining us, what we're doing, we're speaking with Jean Wright for today's NASA Spaceflight Live, and Jean was one of the, we said, sisters on the thermal protection systems for the Space Shuttle program, so she was one of the people that would actually go through and create the thermal blankets, and we were just looking at a gap filler, like as thin as a piece of paper, to keep the shuttles safe, the thermal protection systems. So we're seeing if we can get her reconnected here. Chris, we got her a message?
We did get her a message,
okay,
yes.
Good deal.
Yeah, because this is one of the fascinating things, and I'm glad we were talking about the gap fillers in particular up front, because that's one of the things that always fascinated me about thermal protection systems is you have the tiles, And you think about the tiles being able to fit perfectly together, but they don't.
Yep.
They can't, right? So you have that little piece of paper thin gap between them, and they had to seal them. And I know what Jean was talking about too is those gap fillers, those little ones that she was talking about, the Ames ones, where they could be up to 6 thicknesses or whatever, before they would have to go to the pillow ones. A lot of that also had to do with heating, not just the spacing between the tiles or where they were on the vehicle, but with the heating that the location would actually receive. Because we've talked a lot about with Starship, right, how those aerosurface flaps are going to be moving during atmospheric reentry, and how do you protect a surface that's moving and has to move with a thermal protection system. And the gap fillers were part of how they were able to do that on the shuttle around the elevons and body flap and the external tank doors. Yeah.
I am. Again, we're just trying to get Jean reconnected there. Chris, if you hear anything, let me know. But we're just standing by to get her reconnected. We knew that was going to be an issue with the Wi-Fi and stuff like that. Not a big deal at all. Massive thanks to Jean for joining us from home so that she could be a part of NSF Live. And I think, Chris, what we may have to do is just roll one of our remotes down there and hang out with some, I don't know, thermal protection systems in person, maybe.
We could also do that too. Yes.
We'll get that bonded internet going. So
yeah, and I have seen some of you are asking questions in chat. Yes, please go ahead and tag us at NASASpaceflight if you do have a question for Jean as we as she's getting back online here. But yeah, if you do have a question, please tag us NASASpaceflight in chat, because yes, we do have a lot of good stuff to talk about on this one. But Chris,
I can grab some non-specific questions here if you want to answer some questions while we get Jean back. Here's one from Robert Law saying, were thermal blankets used from the start of the shuttle program, or did it come in later in the program? Is that like first space shuttle had them?
Yeah, so the first space shuttle Columbia was almost all tile because they were not quite sure of the entire heating regime across the vehicle in the early stages of the program. And one thing that Columbia really showed us was that they were over conservative in some areas, especially on the upper parts of the vehicle, like the entire surface of the upper wings, the white surfaces of the wings don't need to be tiles. They can actually be Nomex felt, not even blankets, just Nomex felt, because temperatures there only get to about 370. So you don't even need a blanket there. And that enabled a lot of weight savings. So they switched on Challenger and they went over to much more blankets than tiles. But then even Challenger showed them that they were still over conservative on what they did. And then that got us to Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour, which had the final TPS configurations, or thermal protection system configurations of the orbiters. And they did some work on Columbia throughout her life to replace some areas with blankets to lighten her up a bit on her mask, because the tiles were more heavier than the blankets were, and the felt and everything like that. But when they tried to change her overall TPS configuration to get rid of her big black chines on her wings, there was a massive revolt. And everyone was like, don't you dare, don't you dare, because the chines, those big black tile streaks on Columbia's wings, also weren't necessary. And that's why you never saw them on the others after it. And when they tried to get rid of them, there was a revolt, so they were only able to update her name and the NASA logo on the wings, and other than that, they had to keep some of the other things. Yeah.
Okay. Again, folks, we had Jean on with us, and we had an internet hiccup there, working on getting her back onto the show. But in the meantime, Chris, if you see a message or anything, feel free to just say, hey, we need to do this. I'm trying to watch my phone as well, just in case we need something.
I am too, yeah.
So we knew that was going to be a hiccup, a potential hiccup today, but that is all good.
Yes, and one of the reasons we did want to have Jean on is not just for her wealth of knowledge for the shuttle program, but because there's a big shiny rocket out in Texas that's going to have thermal protection system tiles on it that we know. And one thing that we are definitely building toward is the question about those and how all of that is going to work. So we are we are going on that. And Das, let me pop off really quick for a minute.
Okay, cool. I guess it's just going to be me and y'all, chat. Chris is also going to pop off here, it seems, and it will just be, let's see, what is he under? He's under that right there. It's just me. You're stuck with me. It's the DOS show now. Chris is going to work to help get Jean reconnected, and I will sit here and awkwardly stare at the camera for a few minutes. Just kidding. Again, thank y'all for the understanding on this. We're always working with people's home internet and stuff. Totally not a big deal. We'll get her dialed back over to the call. But we're talking with Jean, or hopefully shortly we'll be talking with Jean Wright again about her experience working on the thermal protection systems from the shuttle program. So I'm going to keep looking through some questions here, and I also have to keep glancing to make sure I don't need to let her back in, because we don't let just anybody join our Zoom calls, right? So I'm going to keep an eye on that as well. But in terms of questions, and I'm going to skip anything that's like specifically asking Jean something. I'm going to skip over those questions and hold those until we get her back. We did get that one about the thermal protection systems. There's a lot of interest. Okay. Just 1 second, y'all. I'm going to give them another link that they can join. 1 sec, we'll get a new link. Oh, here she is. I think we've got her back. Stand by. Let's see here. Joining.
Oh, here we go.
All right. Success. We're getting your audio. We don't quite have your video back yet, Jean. If you could tap that for us.
Yeah, hold on.
Down here.
A moment.
Wait, click that. Here we go. Right there. That.
Okay.
There we go. All right, and I guess we'll let Chris back on as well. Chris,
Yeah, okay.
Jean, we got you both?
Yeah.
We do, yes.
Oh, thank
Excellent.
goodness.
Good deal.
No.
Jean, thank you so much for working through that. Totally not a big deal. I was trying to keep people entertained in the
Oh,
meantime.
well, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you did. I'm sure
I
you
can
did.
talk a lot, that's for sure.
Okay.
So yeah, Jean, I think what we were asking right before was when they realized that gap filler had come out partially during ASCENT and they wanted Steve to go out and remove it, what work did you all have to do on the ground to assist with, what's the best way for him to grab it with those big gloves, and how do you shimmy it out from a tile? Like, what did you have to do on the ground to help with them? Yeah.
Well, that's true. Of course, we had to do mock-ups of that area, but we'd never gone underneath the shuttle before, and we were afraid that he was going to cause more damage going underneath it than actually retrieving it. So the thought was, since it was just an Ames gap filler, one of the thin ones, we could probably get by with it making through reentry and there'd be no issue. But yeah, that would really, we did do some testing on it, but it was more like on 117 when we had the pullback on the OMS pod. That one, we literally had to replicate the section. We had to do, I think it was, let me see here. Yeah, 3 tiles and 2 blankets and simulate that same area of the OMS pod. It's funny because those blankets in that area are a class 11. They're the thickest blankets we made, 2 inches thick. And he goes out there and he's trying to take a little suture kit and trying to fix it and try and do everything. Takes a staple and that's not working and we're laughing. Of course, everybody's saying, who made the blanket? Who made the blanket? And we're saying, it's not who made the blanket, it's who installed it. It's installation that made it do it. Who made the, but what it was is he ended up doing what anybody else would do is he just took his fingers and shoved it down in there. But for that one, it was more serious because you're talking at the top of the ohms and it's gonna have more drag. So we had to fire up our multi-needle sewing machine that makes the blankets and make our thick blankets. And we had to make, our tile people we had to make 4 sets of the same, replicate the section of the ohms and have the 2 blankets and 3 tile. And we literally had 24 hours to get that done and sent to Houston so that they could do wind tunnel testing and testing on heat there. So that was stressful because we had such a short time to replicate that section 4 different times and send it to Houston literally overnight.
Because I remember when that happened, Jean, and I remember, people saying, oh, but they thought they were being overly cautious on 114 with the other one. Like, what's the problem? OMS pod, but depending on the way the shuttles rolled when they were doing their roll programs coming in for
like
reentry, those OMS pods could get really, really toasty. And I imagine too, what they were worried about is if one blanket gave way, it could just zipper the rest of them off, right?
Ideally, no. But one thing interesting about the OMS, we call that the shuttle eyeballs, because you notice there's black tile in front and then white. When we initially built the orbiter, it was all white tile there, which is our lower temperature tile. Yeah. But we found after a few shuttle flights, scarily enough, some of those tiles in that front of the OMS were softening up and actually they lost their form. So we ended up having to, like they say, write an act of God, because to override an original plan or blueprint, you had to go through so many steps, and they ended up changing it to black tile, our higher temperatures in the front, because we didn't realize the tiles would be exposed to that much heat up there, not as high as below, but more heat than they thought would be exposed to it.
Gotcha. So I sort of want to step back for a second from the nitty gritty and go big picture for a second. So an orbiter comes back and it lands, regardless of if it lands at Kennedy or White Sands or out at Edwards. What's the first thing the thermal protection system team did when an orbiter came back?
Well, first, of course, they safe the vehicle to make sure there's no fumes before they bring it back. It's within about 4 hours of landing, it goes across to the bay. I've been in there right afterwards, and people always ask me what it smells like inside the shuttle. If you can imagine damp, stinky, moldy socks, that's exactly what it smells like on the inside of her. I mean, it really smells inside of there, because you're on middeck, and that's where the toilet is, and that's where you come in at. So it's not a pleasant. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant inside of there. But as for thermal protection, you're right. One thing I always found so fascinating is all the tiles and all the blankets get inspected between the flow period. The flow meaning when she lands and when she goes again is called the flow period. So it was beautiful. You would walk underneath the shuttle, and each tile, there's over 25,000. Each one of them had a little ribbon hanging from them. Green meant the tile was good to go. Yellow meant there was something wrong with it. And red meant the tile had to get pulled. So there's thousands of ribbons underneath. It was really quite pretty to see that. If a corner of a tile was damaged, that was automatic for it to come out. But people are surprised when I tell them we could patch up a tile. We came up with a spackle kit. In fact, in the same room where my big multi-needle sewing machine was at, that's where they made the formula. All day we had to listen to this giant mixer mix up this compound that came up with the tile repair kit. But surprisingly, we've come a long way from tile. I would say on the orbiters, at least 80% of them were original tiles from day one. We seldom ever had to replace the tile. We could fix them. And that was huge for us to be able to do that. Yeah. As to getting the orbiter ready, if you'll notice in some of the tile, there's a little hole, we call it a little belly button, but it's a port. We had a waterproofing solution. At first we thought that once we put the solution in the tile, it would be there forever. But we found out through the sensors that we had on the tile, and on Columbia, almost all her tile had sensors or thermocouples, so we could get readings and also to see if the thermal protection would still work, the solution that we used. Oh, wow. And we found out that it burned out at roughly probably 2,000, less than 2,000 degrees. So we knew that was something that was going to have to be done every flow, and we had to. It's called DMES, or dimethylethyloxylane is what it's called.
Bless you.
So
yes.
So we just call it DMES. But it was so time consuming. You're talking about waterproofing 24,000+ tile, and you have to inject each one. We had a needleless gun that would shoot in the port, the waterproofing solution. But for the blankets, there's roughly about 2,500 blankets, and we had a needle, a regular syringe, and every 4 inches, those blankets had to be waterproof. So that was so time consuming. 2,400 blankets, every 4 inches getting squirted, and that
every flow.
Every flow, every single flow.
No
it
kidding.
took very time consuming.
Because I remember, Jean, and this is what sparked me to ask the question. But I remember there was, and of course this happened to several of them. You'd pull the service structure back before liftoff, and then they'd get rained on in the middle of the summer. And if the conditions were right and the lighting was right and the camera angles was right, after they got rained on, you could just see the water streaming off of them, and because of how weatherproof they were. Because I mean, they could have held thousands of pounds of water weight if they weren't proof, right?
You're right, and that's a perfect lead-in, because Terry White, one of my fellow docents at Atlantis, has what we call a coupon, a little tile sample that's like a 2x2 square. We call those are little cubes. He brings water and he pours it into this little coupon, and he can probably get at least in a 2x2 inch little cube, he could probably pour in at least a quart of water, and I'm not kidding you. That's how porous they are. He just pours it and shakes it and pours it. So you're right, thousands of pounds worth of weight, which is why when the shuttle had to land in California and she was coming back on the 747, 9 times out of 10, she'd probably get caught in a desert storm, and they hated that, because again, she did pick up weight, but that's why they always had a weather plane fly in front of her, because they were trying to make sure she didn't fly into any weather.
Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, but because sometimes they would land and you would hope you would get the weather right, but sometimes you wouldn't, and they'd end up getting rained on. Wouldn't you have to basically treat them like a reptile and put heating lamps around them to start to dry them out? Yeah,
they did. We had one flight, and they brought her back from California because she got rained on. And we have a really cool T-shirt. It shows a bunch of text underneath the shuttle, and we all have spider webs, and we're skeletons because we're trying to use heat lamps and dryers to dry the blankets. But anyway, we're all skeletons sitting in a chair with spider webs on us because it took so long to dry her out. Yes.
No kidding.
So here's a nitty-gritty one for you, Jean. What did it actually take to make one of those blankets? That was on, because we call them blankets, and I feel like that's massively deceiving to what they actually are.
Well, initially they were called AFRISI, Advanced Flexible Reusable Surface Insulation Blankets. And if you go to old print, you'll see AFRISI. But because we switched to Frizzy, they said this is what's on the wings and the payload bay door. It's a felt. It was too confusing, so we switched it to FIBS, or fibrous insulated blankets. So I'll go back to my Frizzy, but this is the machine that we quilt them on. It's a 30 needle sewing machine. I don't know if you can see that clearly.
Make that bigger. Yeah, we can see it. We can definitely see it.
It's got a blanket coming out, but the needles, there's 30 of. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
All good. Dry. It's a lot of talking, isn't it?
That, and I've got fibers around me, and they always work. It reminds me of working on the shuttle because the fibers get down your throat. Anyway,
feel right at home.
It's got 9-inch long needles, and it takes about 3.5 minutes for it to quilt one way. We turn the plate around, and it quilts it. This one is, like I said, it's got what we call a PU, a production unit. It's a 30 by 30 inch square piece of fabric, and that's what's coming out of the machine. But I do have a close up here where you can see the needles. We had 4 gallons of WD-40 in the trough right above the needles. And as the blankets were coming through, and as the seamstress putting oil on a fabric, we had a spray bottle that we would have to spray the fabric as it was going through. And when we talk about blankets, there's 11 different classes or thicknesses. We made them as thin as a placemat to 2 inches. The 2-inch ones, class 11s, were the ones on the ohms. But when we were using this sewing machine, the center needles got very, very hot. A lot of tension in the center needles.
Yeah.
So we had this little procedure that Kathy and I did the majority of the blankets. So Kathy and I had this thing, you're always listening. The machine is kind of loud, but you're listening for the machine to go ting. And I told Das this story earlier, but we actually had a quality guy, and we had it a rule: you could not go into the multi-needle room without safety goggles on. And this guy said, "Oh, but I got my glasses on. I don't need it. I don't need to." And his name was John. And anyway, just as when John went behind the machine, we heard a tink, and I said to John, "One of the needles are about to go. You better put on those goggles." And literally, as soon as he did, one of the center needles snapped and flew across the room. That's how much tension they're under.
Wow.
So to make those, yes, we quilt that 30 by we have this 30 by 30 inch piece. And what we do is we get our pattern that we look at our print, And we trace it on the back. And I happen to have, this is what it looks like. I don't know if you see that's the back of a blanket.
Oh, we can, yeah.
And if you look closely on the edge, we have to hand knot where the threads intersect. We have to hand knot all the way around the blanket, and that takes time to do. Then we flip the fabric, and you can see me in this picture here. If I can see it good, here we go.
Yep.
You can see my hands. I'm hand sewing the back of the blanket, and all 2,500 of those are stitched by hand. And then what happens is in the back, then before we get ready to glue them on, they go inside. I'll make sure I get it up right side down. It goes inside of here. We have what looks like a pizza oven.
Like an oven, yeah.
Yeah.
And the blankets are heat cleaned and they're baked at 650 degrees for 4 hours. We bump it up to 850 for 2 hours, and it turns the fabric from beige to, it looks like silk when we take it out. It's very shiny white.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
And then it gets in the back, and I'm going to show you this one, this little blanket. This is the back of this one. You can see the hand stitches.
Yeah.
You can see the RTV glue. So we have that. So this blanket would be glued on the back of, well, be glued on, and then the magic starts, because once we install that blanket, it gets a clear coat of ceramic paint called C9 or ceramic 9, and then 8 hours later we'll get the white coat that we put on it. And so that's why she looks variegated in color, not only from reentry, but but you can actually hit it, and it sounds like you're hitting a porcelain, and it protects the fabric. But it's hard to believe the first 10 shuttle flights, we didn't put the coating on it. And the blankets, as the older ladies told me, look like blown out Pampers, especially in the Elm Spot area, because the wind would catch it and just break the threads and the batting would come out. So after about probably the 6th or 7th flight, they said we need to put a coating on it. So that's when they started doing it. But STS-6 was the first one we put test blankets on. So the orbiters, of course, Challenger and Columbia were covered with tile, but on STS-6 we actually had test blankets on Challenger to see if the concept would work.
Yeah.
So
that's I got to ask about the WD-40 real quick. Like the 4 gallons of WD-40 in the top. You said there was like a big tub or something.
The trough. Yes.
That was was it lubricating the needles so they could go through the fabric?
It is. In fact, that's a good question, because if the machine had sat for a while, you would see these little honey beads, little dripping going down the needle, little drips of oil at the bottom of each needle.
No kidding.
So,
it sounds terrible. Like, oh no, you don't want to put WD-40 in your clothing or whatever.
Exactly.
But
then we know it's going to get heat cleaned. But you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
No kidding.
One story about the needles. As the program was winding down, there was only one company in the world that made those, and it was in Germany. And we were running low on needles, and we had to keep an inventory of stock as the program was winding down. And bless our machine techs, because they told us if we ordered needles, we would have to order 50,000 needles. That was the smallest order that they would accept. And we said, but the program's winding down. We don't need 50,000. So we kept as many needles as we could. Some of them, as the hole got closer to the point, we ended up using those. And the guys would literally take a little file and file our needles for us to make our needles last long enough to the end of the program when we built them. So, yeah, that was kind of...
Speaking of some of the tools and stuff you used, you sent me all these pictures of sewing machines and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to bring up some of these. I started with, let's see, this was just rolls of raw material, right?
Yeah, let me get this thing out of here. I got my little warning out. Let me pop that off. There we go.
Okay, all good.
Oh, what did I do? What did I do?
Are we still here? We still have you.
Oh, we still have you, Jean.
Can you see us?
But I don't have you. No, I don't.
Well, we can still see you. This is something that looks like a gift wrapping machine with gift paper. Okay.
Oh, what that is, let me see if I can find a picture that shows that. That's not
we've got it on screen, for them.
Oh, no, I have a part.
She's got more pictures, Chris.
Here we go.
Oh, yes.
Here we go. You see, that's inside the FRCX section by the nose, and you see the silver blankets. That's polyimide. And what you see on your picture that you have up there, those are rolls of polyimide, and that's what makes this blanket here. So I thought I'd show the picture. We have, believe it or not, in the shuttle, over 5,300 of those silver blankets that we have. And I'm going to see if I can find, I'm such a mess here today.
You have so many pictures.
Oh,
I'm just going to bring a camera to your house.
I have one with me. So I have one here. And believe it or not, this one has layers of batting, but I also have one called an MLI. Now, This is our payload bay blanket. So this is a little sample of beta cloth, but I'm going to surprise you when I say it's MLI, it's multi-layer. Now there were 2,300 of these inside the payload bay, over 5,300 silver ones, but this is what's inside of one blanket that goes inside the payload bay. You see all those layers? There's 18 layers that we have. Now in this configuration, it's called MLI for multi-layer. So we have beta cloth on top, the silver polyimide on the back, and then we have solar shield mylar that goes right underneath the beta, so it reflects the sun's heat.
Yeah.
And we have our little we have mylar here, and then we've got a Dacron mesh. I don't know if you can pull it out here. There we go. There we go.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
Because we can't have metal touching metal, so we have to have a layer of, we call it bridal netting or scrim. Technically it's called scrim,
bridal
but it's
netting.
a Dacron mesh. It's Dacron mesh that goes in between. But again, this one, we either made them 9 or 18 layers. So this one has 18 in it, but that's what an inside of a blanket in the payload bay would be looking like.
I got to jump in real quick. People in chat are asking, how do you have all this stuff? Like, isn't this like,
how do I have all this
this
stuff?
has to be in a museum? I mean, how do you have this stuff? You just
you
have everything.
I have these two that everybody wants to.
Oh yeah.
Jeez, you know.
Well, part of what it is because I'm fortunate enough that my old building realizes that I do outreach work either at Atlantis or I give talks around the country. So they've been very supportive, and they say, you know what, you're bringing good tidings and let everybody in the world know what we still do here, because we still are doing all that there.
Yep.
And but that's how I'm allowed to.
This
Yes,
doesn't
allowed
just
to do that.
end up in a display case in a collector's shelf in some house that nobody will see. You use these.
Well, some of it I do.
some of you do, but you use these to do your outreach. Like you go to different places and you have like, here's a tile and here's this example of the materials and stuff like that. So you have quite a collection.
And I also have, like I said, I have one of these too. Now this thing that's peeking out here, that's called a filler bar. And that's what we have in between the tile too. No, the reason why we have a filler bar, which is rare, the blankets are supposed to butt up against each other, and on the off chance through shimmying that they don't, we're allowed to put this piece of felt filler bar in between to fill the space between a blanket. That seldom happens, but it does.
So y'all know Atlantis at KSCVC, right? That's a fake. She's got Atlantis in the room behind her right now. She just has all the pieces in her garage, and they had to make a fake Atlantis for the museum. Sorry, Chris. Sorry.
Yes.
No. Like that's.
But
I mean, Jean. One of the things, like a personal story, but one of the things that I, one of my favorite memories of you and I being together at a space event was at the last Furies night we were actually able to have in person. And we ended up, over the course of the night, we both had gravitated over toward Atlantis, and we were talking to people about things underneath. And I will never forget that this small little group just stayed with us and stayed with us and stayed with us until finally the event organizers had to ask us to leave because it was 2 a.m. and they wanted to go home. and we were just talking, and it was which is why, because you have all these stories, you have all this stuff, and it's absolutely incredible. And something you just said piqued my curiosity. So the blankets were supposed to butt up against one another. So at the places specifically on the OMS pods where the blankets intersected with tiles, was that a gap filler, or what was put, or was the blanket thick enough to form that
That's
pond?
called the blanket tile interface.
Okay, see.
And
is this a picture of that?
If you look
Yes.
closely, you'll see. Believe it or not, after we glue the blankets on, we have a needle and thread, a curved needle, and we literally do an overcast stitch and join the blankets together on the top. It's a loop stitch that we pull them together. As for in front of the ohms where they interface at, sometimes it would require a filler bar, but most of the time we just counted on the adhesive and the blanket fitting so tightly in there that we wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Help us out with this picture real quick. Like, you can see some tiles, I think, on the bottom of this picture, right?
Yes,
in
that's
the top,
the eyeball. That's the eyeball. That's the
eyeball of the shuttle. But the top of
and
this is all the thermal blankets. Right? I say
is.
blankets, but you can see the stitching on this. You look at the space shuttle and you're like, oh yeah, the big space shuttle.
And that was Atlantis,
That's
So when I take my little pointer when people are Atlantis and I point it and show the exact blanket that it happened on, But yeah, that's a class 11. That's a 2-inch blanket. You can see the girth on that. That's why we're laughing when we're watching NASA TV and we're seeing them trying to get the little suture kit, trying to get it down, and we're laughing because we're saying there's no way in hell he's going to get that back in place.
With in space with the spacesuit on. Yeah, really.
Oh, I know, but and again, that's the area that we replicated. And I do have this, and that I don't know if you can.
Of course you do.
See that's I don't know if I have. I think I may have included that. I don't know if I. No, I don't think I did. But anyway, that's John. That's Alivas actually going out. He's the astronaut. I don't think I did.
Yeah,
anyway,
I don't have that one.
Yeah, that's him doing the spacewalk so that he can fix it. And he also came. It's one thing I have to say about the job was so cool is because thermal protection is the most important system. The astronauts 9 times out of 10 would come into our building afterward and shake our hands. So we got to thank us for bringing them home. Some of them would joke, "My wife not thank you with the way she's feeling about me today," but but we met a lot of astronauts who would shake our hand and thank us for bringing them home.
And I think that's a good point, right, Jean? Like we talk so much about the managers who have the final go no go, right, purview over the entire program, but if you didn't get a stitch right, that could have been a bad day.
We have so many steps, and people are, even as something as basic as a gap filler, they even the pillow one that has a little cording on top, there's probably at least 40 buys for that one. Is a part as basic as that, because you're not only buying your fabrics to make sure you use the right fabrics, even the right thread, the right batting, the right innards to it, and also when we put on the RTV, because after we finish the gap filler, we have to paint the edges of it so that they don't fray, and then they'll trim it across the street. So the RTV is mandatory, but we have like 3 different specs just for RTV, and curing it and everything else. So there's 40 steps just for even one little simple gap filler.
Wow. But that's because it was so important. I mean, getting through all the thermal regime that it had to deal with, that was life or death. That was the most important thing. Rocket engines, that's fantastic. You know, oh, we've got a payload arm, that's great. Look at these instruments and stuff. But if you couldn't protect yourself from the reentry, or from the trip up too, you can't go, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're not kidding about the stitches. Like I said, they were even quilting our blankets. The call out was 4 stitches per inch. Sewing thermal barriers in, no more than, we had 12 stitches per inch, stitching them in plus or minus an inch. And quality is there with their little scale ruler, making sure we're not going over. Even back by the engines, I want to talk about the dome heat shield blankets. If you can bring that one up.
Let's see here.
Again, that was the one we sewed lurch with because we're sewing through Cerachrome, and Cerachrome's hard to describe. It looks like particle board, but it's in shades of olive greens, grays, and blacks. And when you cut it, little glass balls roll on it. And so you're using but it's only like 54 inches across, in a dome heat shield blanket's 8.5 feet across. So we had 3 layers of it. So we're dividing our half circle into 3 spots and hand sewing the Cerachrome together to make a half an arch. And we had to do that 9 different times just to do half of one.
Wow.
And again, 125 rows that radiate out on the blanket. All of those are hand knotted. And then we have a 4-inch sleeving that we roll over the edges of the blanket, and that's all hand sewn on.
Wow.
And then the blanket itself on the back is stitched on by hand, I might add, with an Inconel 625 wire. So all of those blankets are stitched on by hand. And that's what surprises everybody, because I talk about how cool the front of the shuttle is, but I find the back end more fascinating because I know all the technicality stuff involved with that.
So like they would install the engines, then they would install the tile covers over them, and then you all would have to go in and hand sew that blanket around each of the engines.
Underneath there is a flex seal that we had to sew by hand too. So that's like a liner underneath that. And all the loops are hand sewn on. There's a lot of, if you'll notice, I don't know if I can't see in that one, but those loops we have to fold like origami and fold those and make them ourselves and do some stitching. And then we have a call out that tells us from the center of the ring, 0.9, 1.10. So there's like 6 measurements that radiate out that we have to, and then they're getting their little ruler there to make sure that we're in on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always was
Wow.
so fascinated by those blankets because those are basically for sound suppression, what we
Okay.
have them for back there.
No
So,
kidding.
That's
anyway.
interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
For the sound support. Oh yeah, because they would be able to just absorb just enough of the acoustic load back
And
there.
thank goodness for rainbirds too. Yes, thank
Well,
goodness for the rainbirds.
Oh yeah.
You'd be surprised. You suppose how much noise there is underneath there, but we were having tiles crack and
Yep.
everything around there.
Oh yeah. So a curiosity question. This isn't actually one that I came up with. This is why I love talking with you. It's just,
Yeah.
so the 5 times that they had an engine abort out at the launch pad, and I know from your story this predates when you were there with them, but when they had an engine abort out at the pad, was it easier for you all to go out and remove all the things that you needed when they were replacing the engines vertically out at the pad, or was it easier if they brought them back to the VAB?
That's a good question. We were having some issues on one flight, and I actually had to go up on the pad and sew them back up again.
Did you have to,
One of them had come loose. Yeah, and I'm so afraid of heights. And there's like a little step that you go up, and then you go up underneath there. And literally, as I was just starting to sew it back on, they had a fire drill, and so we had to stop all of our work and run all the way down, all the way down. So
perfect for someone afraid of heights. Get off a gigantic structure quickly.
So I'm going to point out really quickly, Jean, you keep saying, oh, we did this, we did this, we did this, sewing these on the back. This isn't like the Royal NASA we. This is you and your team, the people you worked with, were there sewing these things onto the spaceship.
Yeah, we did that, and when the parts went across the street, sometimes they would be installing too. If they got behind schedule, generally the guys across the street and the ladies would do the installation, but if they got behind schedule, they said, you ladies are faster with the sewing. So I would do the thermal barriers, and you brought up the parachutes, so I will quickly talk about the parachutes.
Yes.
I thought it was fortunate. We had to repair the shuttle chutes. Those are 40 feet across, and the guys literally would drag them across the runway, and we would scream at NASA TV going, you guys aren't the ones that have to fix them. we had machines that had 4 bobbins and 4 needles so that we could stitch up 4 rows at a time on both sides. I did get sent out to the parachute facility for a year because I worked on the Orion test parachutes, which was kind of neat to do.
Yeah.
They were all red, white, and blue were the first ones, and I have some of that ribbon from those test shoots too that they let me have. But those were unique sewing machines. We had one machine called Thumper. Again, we named them all.
Oh yeah.
This machine, that was the one I worried about getting my hand stabbed, because we're stitching at the top of a canopy of a parachute is 8 inches thick on the Orions, and even the shuttle ones were really thick at the
8
top.
inches thick.
So we have a really
8 inches.
heavy duty machine, and the needle was, I would say, at least a 9-inch long needle. And he was called Thumper because we had to put hearing protection on when we sewed with him. Every stitch sounded like you had your fist being hit against the wall with each stitch,
Just like
because it's going through literally going through it. It's very slow, and you're trying to guide it, and the needles were so big. And that was the only time I worried about getting a needle through the top of my hand, because you're going through such thickness when you're working on those.
Speaking of naming machines, we got this one too. You sent me this one. This was one of your named sewing machines, right?
That's Lurch. He's the one that did quilt the dome heat shield blankets, and again do our 2 rows of closeout stitching on our fibs that we did, the quilted blankets on the outside.
But this isn't like, oh, NASA special ordered this fancy sewing machine or anything. This was an older sewing machine, right?
It was. In fact, we had 3 older ones. He was our old.
Oh no. No, perfect timing. We may have had the internet drop again there. Y'all, again, give us just 1 second. We knew this was some hiccups we were going to be having today. Jean can get
one.
there we go.
go.
It's just running out the buffer. She's gonna have to reconnect.
Yeah.
Hang on, yeah. Sorry, that was just the video buffer. She'll be back in just 1 second. Here we go. Let's switch over this way. Oh, oops. I didn't have a background behind that one. That's okay. Folks, bear with us for just a second. You know it's going to be worthwhile. I hope you're enjoying the show today. I know a lot of times it's like, oh, space news, and let's talk about Starship some more. Oh, great. But today, super special guest, Jean, all of her stories about working on the thermal protection systems, the original Sew sisters that were putting together these blankets and heat shield parts and stuff like that. I hope you're enjoying these stories here. We will get Jean back in just a second. It's going to take us just a second to get her video and audio back. Yeah, super cool. She's great. It's awesome. She's phenomenal.
Yeah.
This is just, I know, we'll get her back in just a second, y'all.
Yeah. Because there are just so many things that you don't that you don't think about when you're talking about a thermal protection. Like when you hear multi-layer insulation blankets and things like that, you don't think there are little gold pieces inside and silver pieces and white pieces and and all the different. Oh yeah, and I mean, like I love the story about how the way you make a thermal blanket to protect against heat is to put it in an oven.
Put it in an oven
and
nice.
Bake it.
Bake it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No kidding. And Chris, make sure we get a message to her. Make sure she's okay. I'm going to tell you something. Jean does outreach around the Space Coast. There's a couple different places that she ends up. In fact, just earlier today, she was at the American Museum over in Titusville, right? It was at the American Space Museum. And she left doing in-person outreach there to come and be on the show so she could share some of her stories with people all over the world. But if you're at the Space Coast and you're going down for a launch or something like that, ask around because Jean shows these things and tells these stories in person on occasion. We'll ask her about her schedule and stuff. I think it's, like the third Thursday or something like that, right? I think she has a regular schedule, but if you want some cool stories like in person from somebody who worked on the story, make sure you keep an eye out for that. Hey, Visitor Center's fantastic. Saturn V's fantastic. Seeing this, that's all great. What you want to do, the secret to go to the Space Coast, is go to a place where you can hear stories like this. Because they're fantastic. Just sit, keep your mouth shut, and just listen.
Yeah. I mean, I wish there was a day, and Jean can tell us a bit more of her schedule, but I wish there was some way you could call and say, like, is this docent working today?
Is Jean there today? I'm not coming if Jean's not there. Like,
yeah, because walking underneath Atlantis with her is just, oh my gosh, the stuff you learn. Yeah. Yeah, so they're definitely recovering it, and I know I know we're going to take a little bit longer because I know we've had a couple of hiccups today, so I know go a little bit past 4:30.
You know us.
Yeah, and I know I know the big question that everyone has, because you got to know what we're building toward here, and she does too. We're getting to the question about Starship, and we're getting there. But Dawes, one of the things that I think helps, right? Because we talk a lot about the shuttle program and everything that it wanted to be, but we also talked about its complexity and learning from the lessons of the past, right? And obviously something that should be hitting everyone here is how incredibly complex and time consuming
that's labor
intensive
protection
is. Yeah.
I mean, labor intensive. So
yeah, very much so. So you can understand why SpaceX is trying to go cookie cutter, not, oh no, this Starship needs this kind of a tile and this one needs that. You can see why they're trying to go cookie cutter in that regard and make it as simplistic as possible. But there's also holdovers too. We're not just going to touch upon Starship here. There are holdovers and thermal blankets and tiles on the Orion spacecraft, on the Starliner vehicle, on the X-37B. So we're gonna get to that there as well.
Yeah, but and I keep looking over. I have to readmit her, so I'm looking. When I look over here, I'm seeing if she's reconnected yet. Again, folks, thank you so much for understanding here. Home internet connections and stuff like that. At some point, Chris, I'm not kidding, I will roll one of the broadcast kits down there. Y'all just hang out in person, and I'll handle all of the internet with one of our mobile broadcast kits. I think that would be an amazing, amazing time. But, chat, thank y'all so much. Mary needs to loan Panlink to Jean. It's just the nature of South Florida internet, right, or Space Coast internet.
It is, and we've had a good chunk of rain, like more than usual here, and a lot of our cables are underground and they are not well insulated. I once had my home internet company tell me that there was nothing they could do about the intermittent dropouts because it was just squirrels chewing the line.
See what they need to do, Chris, for the rain. They need to go every 4 inches with a needle, and then inject waterproofing into the line so your internet doesn't get messed up. Come on,
weatherproof those things.
NASA can put a man on the moon, but we can't get stable internet.
Indeed. but yeah, and it's Yeah, we hear it, you know.
Yeah. All good. Any messages or anything I can help with, Chris?
Not yet.
Okay,
Not
I'm
yet.
I'm checking my
the
phone
cycle
and
getting back. Yeah.
making sure. And we have a backup number as well. We expected that the internet might drop for a minute or two on occasion. Again, y'all, thank you for
Right.
understanding. This isn't like a big studio and we've got hair and makeup and then go into the studio as Gene is dialing in from home. So 100% thank you all for understanding. And thank Gene for working through this sort of stuff with us. This really is a lot of fun. I like this. Laser said, if you go to KSC look for people that worked on Shuttle or Apollo. They love to share their stories. The docents around the museums. I've had the honor of walking around one of the engineers that worked on some of the separation systems, right? And it was just walking around the Saturn V there in the Saturn V Center at the VC and just listening to stories.
Like, and so she's asking me to call real quick, so I'm just going to switch off.
Yep, sounds good. All good, Chris. All right, so we're back to the DOS show once again. If I find Chris's camera, I can actually just make it so it's me like this. I should have color-coded these. Yeah, there we go. But we're working to get Gene back once again, y'all. Just the internet hiccups. You know how the home internet is. So, you want to cut to the Bluebirds for a little while? I don't have that set up today, actually. But thank you for understanding. Chris is getting on the phone with her, helping her get reconnected here, and we should have Gene back shortly. We knew that this was going to be a thing, but you know something? Honestly, totally worth it. Totally worth the fantastic stories that we're getting from Gene. I can't stress it enough. This is the sort of stuff that needs to be preserved. This is the stuff that we need to share. It's this type of stuff that we need to record because these stories, hearing them firsthand is absolutely fantastic. All right, let's see here. I will get another link here really quickly. And there's that. Just 1 second. I'm the only one. Now, there's that. We'll send it again. That's it. Password embedded. There you go. The joys of being the technical person running the show and the host who's on the camera doing the talking. Sometimes I have to mumble under my breath as I send information to to the people in the background. But in any event, we're continuing to hang out here. We should get Gene reconnected in just a second. Chris is on the phone with her, and he's nodding, which looks like a good sign. Aha! There we go. Stand by. And let's see if we can reestablish communications with our special guest, Jean Wright.
There it is. Okay, we got it now.
All right. Just need the...
I'm so...
No, absolutely not a problem at all, Gene. Absolutely not a problem. I think we all understand how home internet is.
I'm not there. Wait, there we go.
Yep. There's your camera coming back. Excellent. And then I'll turn it back on, and we'll get Chris back here as well. Let's see.
Okay.
Here
all right.
comes Chris. And here comes... Too many windows. There we go. All right. We're back once again. Gene, we got you back. Thanks again.
Thanks. So lay the questions on me.
Yeah, Chris, take it away. Talking while muted. Talking while muted.
Talking while muted, yes, that's one of my specialties on NSF Live.
Plus 10 internet points if you know the
muted.
reference. Okay,
Yes.
we were talking about Lurch. I think we had Lurch up on the screen.
Yes.
The screen here. There we go, and get that other camera back. Go ahead.
And like I said, if you show a close-up, you can see in the bottom part, you'll see what his original configuration was. It was very, very small, and we added about a 4-foot section into the machine to make him big so we could put our blankets underneath it. So yeah, he's come a long way. It's a long way. It's funny when people take a tour of our building, everybody's heard about Lurch and they all want to see him.
Yeah. So when was this machine made?
1914, and it was a Singer. Singer has a lot of history. The Wright brothers used Singers. We use Singer sewing machines to make the moon suits. That was Big Mo and Sweet Sue, because even they, at ILC Dover, they named their sewing machines too. So
Oh wow.
Yeah, we got you, Chris. Good deal. So
Okay, good.
people give us grief sometimes because we like to name things like, oh, that crane is called this, or whatever. But it's apparently a thing. We've got a sewing machine named Lurch. We had one named Thumper. There was Big Mo and Sweet Sue. Is that what they were called?
But there were the Apollo suits. In fact, when I went up to ILC Dover, I had the honor. Literally, if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see a woman with Lucille Ball red hair. That's Ruthie Ratledge. And when I went to ILC Dover, that's in Delaware. Ruthie was one of the last, if not, she was the last surviving Apollo seamstress that was still working at ILC Dover, working on our shuttle suits, the EVA suits.
Yeah.
And anyway, she was working part-time, but she was 84 back when I met her in 2016, and she just retired about a year and a half ago.
Wow.
But I mean, she did a lot of things for ILC Dover.
God.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Folks, that's what you have to, like, you see this screen, right? And it's got, right here next to me, the date on it. It's 2013. This was 99 years old when the photo was taken, and it was used to sew, this was used to show parts of the space shuttle, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, wait, I got to ask, like, why can't we get a fancy new sewing machine that has, like, I don't know, electronics and smartphone technology and 3D scanning and, why did we use a sewing machine from 1914?
I smile when you say that.
Yeah,
Because when we say industrial machines, most machines nowadays, sewing machines, are plastic and the gears are plastic. Back then is when the machines were made like men, like really strong men. They had metal gears, metal outside. They were very, very heavy machines, but they were strong. They were strong machines.
Yeah.
I mean, Lurch could sew through 2 inches of leather making a saddle. So we knew that's exactly what we needed.
Before it sewed space shuttle fabric, it was sewing saddles?
Sewing saddles.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There we go.
Gosh.
So Jean, you told me a story once, and you told Nate a story once too, about it wasn't just thermal protection and sewing that you had to do on the orbiters or flight hardware. You had to climb the launch tower and sew up the beanie cap at one point. Can you tell us about that? Yeah.
Well, like I said, for a girl that's afraid of heights, there's cameras everywhere up there. And there's a little walkway that leads up into the beanie cap. And it literally was as wide as my hips, but you've got a work bag that you're carrying all your stuff up there. I would say a prayer when I got off the elevator. Oh God, the cameras are on. Don't let me look foolish up here, because it's scary up there. But what's so beautiful up there is the water's gorgeous up there, 7, 8 different colors of blue, and it was very relaxing. But yes, you're right. We had GOX hoses, we call them GOX hoses, gaseous oxygen hoses.
Yeah.
And like I said, they look like a pleated dryer hose. Some of them are covered with a really hard, like plaster paint. But in the areas that were the soft fabric parts, we would have to go up there and put patches on them because, of course, they're exposed to the elements. And also, there were 2 people up there at all times. Their jobs were to keep the birds off the external tank. So they had plastic owls up there. They had balloons with faces up there. One guy had an air horn, another one had a water gun, and that was their job for 8 hours. And they couldn't listen to music. They couldn't read. Through hot and cold, that was their job, was to keep the birds off the tank. Because as we well know, on STS-70, we had woodpeckers that were pecking holes in the external tank. And we finally counted, I think there were like close to 250 holes that they had pecked in it. And we thought we could repair the tank on the pad, and they tried. But then when they saw the number of divots that were knocked in, they think it was mating or nesting season, they told us they actually had to take take it back to the VAB and repair the tank, which is why Don Thomas had a special patch made for STS-70, and it's a unique patch. And I don't have a picture with it on me right now, but he gave me one. It has Woody the Woodpecker on the patch, and only the crew and family members were given that special STS-70 patch. And he had me make him and a co-writer of his book shirts that had woodpeckers on them. So yes.
That's okay. I don't have the woodpecker shirt. I've got the pizza shirt. is the shirt that you sent
No,
me.
I
right?
don't. I didn't send that one.
That's not
but
the
yes,
okay.
it's a woodpecker one. Yes, it's woodpeckers all over it.
What? So
Yeah.
you made this pizza shirt. Talking about shirts you've made, why did you make a pizza shirt?
Because he was the first one to take all the stuff that they had food-wise on board the shuttle. He made the first pizza in space. So that's what he's known for. Yeah, there's the picture. He said, "Thank you for making the shirt." Yes, but he was the first astronaut to make a pizza in space.
That's cool.
And you made him a shirt to commemorate the making of the
he
pizza
wanted a
in
pizza
space.
shirt.
Nice.
He wanted when he goes on his talks, he said he wants something to be a conversation starter.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's a conversation
And I
starter.
can
For
tell he's awkward because he's in a hotel room and his wife took the picture and he says, "I'm not a supermodel. What am I supposed to do?"
This is the go ahead and take the picture already pose. Like,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
So speaking of photos, Jean, I believe there's one here that's going to blow a lot of people's minds because it blew mine right before we came on air. So when we think about crazy things that you wouldn't think there's thermal protection system around something that's not metal, you were telling me something about the thrusters and how the thrusters were wood. And you had to cover
the forms were wood.
The forms were wood. So, but the thrusters themselves also had thermal protection system.
Yes, inside.
Involved. So tell me about that. Yeah.
They're kind of unique, and we made is everything. People who don't sew, everything's cut on the bias at a 45-degree angle. You get the most stretch on a fabric when you do that. Anytime you're going on a circle, you need as much stretch to get it to lay perfect. So we have a spring tube in that oval that you see there. We have a spring tube that we stuff with matting, and we have a formula how much grams of matting go inside that spring tube. So math does come into play. But you'll lay that on the top of the wooden tool, take your fabric, drape it down into the tube, and we hand sew all the way around underneath the spring tube, 2 rows of stitching. Then you'll see the red RTV at the bottom. After that's shaped, it goes into what we call a reverse mold, and we put that whole wooden structure into another outer structure that squeezes that for 4 days to dry it. And so then you see the RTV is, it's about 3 inches high, but again, we go back to calipers. That part, we only had a 1% failure rate, between 1 and 5% failure rate on our parts. With a thruster, it went up to 12%. Those things are so tricky.
Yeah.
Quality would take the caliper. When you're tightening that, we're putting the outer structure around the wooden tube for the RTV to dry. You're going strictly by finesse and your experience. Quality, once we took it out of the mold, would take their calipers, and if it was too thick or too thin, the RTV, it got scrapped. And we also had, if you squeezed it too tight, and we had what we call bleed through. If it squeezed up, the RTV would go above the stitch line. And we were allowed probably about 10% of a bleed through, about the RTV working its way up above the stitch line. But once we went over 10%, the part was scrapped. So it had a lot of things that would make that one tricky.
I want to clarify that for just a second. So when you say RTV, you're talking about the red
the
part
red
here,
glue,
right?
the adhesive part. Yes.
And you can see it's like this is the fabric up here. This is the fabric, and then this is almost like I'm going to say the word dipped. Was it like brushed on or dipped or something like that?
No, we painted it. No,
You
it had to be
painted it on.
painted on.
Yeah.
We painted it on, and then it would go into the reverse mold and be hugged to dry for the 4 days.
So this part here was the RTV, and that's where it's sort of like
red
over
part,
the
correct.
fabric. The red part was the RTV. Gotcha.
And that's where they would take the calipers if it was too thick or too thin. And again, if you see any bleeding above the stitch line, we were allowed that.
Yeah.
Again, you're using finesse as to how much you tighten that when you're putting it in for the final dry.
Yeah.
And again, depending on where it was going to go, we also had another step that we would paint a mittens coating. It's like a gray slurry that would go on it.
Yeah.
We used to call that our Pillsbury certification because what we would do is it would.
Oh
no!
Just as we brought up the emissivity coating, did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Just as we brought it up, folks, she was just talking about the gray that she would paint on, and that's this here. The gray part on this was the pillow gap filler. But the same sort of thing, we may have an internet hiccup situation here. Give us just 1 second. Again, thank you for bearing with us on this. I'll just do that for now. And there we go. And we'll see if we can get Jean reconnected. We may get some audio run out from her whenever the buffer clears out here, but give us just 1 second. Chris, you know the drill. and
Already
let's make
sent
sure
it,
she's
yep.
completely supported. If there's anything we can do to help her out,
And we would have to wait apart. Put
that's just the buffer running out before she disconnects. Okay. And y'all, again, thank you so much for being patient with us on this. Jean took time out of her day to join us from home, and some internet hiccups there. She's on Wi-Fi and stuff like that on the Zoom call. I really do appreciate people understanding that. I will tell you, I'm not kidding. I want to go down, and the sort of like killer show that will break shuttle fan internet would be Jean and Chris walking around Atlantis just talking.
Just talking, yes.
Just talking. I don't even care what you talk about, just talking. So maybe what we'll do, we'll have an encore to this at some point. We'll have to work with the visitor center and stuff like that. I don't want to make any promises I can't keep, but
Oh, I think we should, because I've still got half my questions.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, just like when we had a Jonathan McDowell on a couple of months ago, where it's just so fascinating. We have to have them back. Yeah, and
that link
is just incredible. The amount of like hand stuff they had to do.
Chris, I was just telling you, same link. If she needs that link again or something, that same link will work that I just sent there. So. Again, y'all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for understanding on that. Please do it. We're sticking around. This is great. Yeah, great stream, you guys. Thanks for inviting Jean. Thank you to Jean for spending time with us today. This is one of the best NSF live shows. That's awesome. Y'all, just thank you so much for the kind words. I don't want people to be like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. I mean, we're relying on people's home internet and stuff like that, and it just is what it is. Like, who hasn't had this happen on a Zoom call, right? We're using Zoom today. So this is great content.
We've all been there on the annoying day that the internet will only work in 30-minute chunks of time.
We should time that. We should go back to the VOD and see if her internet is dropping like every 30 minutes on the dot or something, and then use that as...
It's pretty close, actually.
Yeah,
it's pretty close because it was right before 3:30, right before 4, and now right before 4:30.
Yeah, it's some diagnostic for her ISP, I guess we could say. Well, she was on the show, and we can tell you that the internet's not reliable. We have video of the internet not being reliable.
But it's incredible to me how much of it is by hand. Like they didn't dip that fabric. There was no machine that could do it. Perfectly. Oh man.
And painting it on and
just the idea that you use wood to help make something that goes in the thruster is the part that blew my mind. Like
that was this picture. I mean, you see these like 1990 salad bowl looking things in the background here. Those are actually thruster mock-ups, right? She said they were thruster tools or thruster tooling. And when they made the heat shield parts, the TPS parts, they would use those wooden forms because those were the same size and shape as the thrusters, the holes that they were working with and the equipment they had to work on, instead of having a thruster there on the table. So that is all good. Chris, go ahead. Yes. Oh, geez, yeah, I have to turn it off on that scene as well. Was not 100% set up to cut all the other cameras here, but I appreciate y'all hanging in there with us. Look, we can put these fancy NASA spaceflight logos on, and I'm actually just going to go ahead and change the color on those so they stick out a little bit more next time I have to click on them. Stand by. Y'all won't see that. But in any event, this is just the coolest thing, getting to hear stories from someone who was there, like quite literally there. Not an internet warrior who read Wikipedia, knows everything. Oh, I know everything about rocket engines because I read on Wikipedia once. You know who you are. Come on. This is someone who was actually there working on the systems. First-hand primary source. Didn't hear it from a brother's, friend's, third cousin's, uncle, aunt who worked at NASA with the person who was... Anyways, you get the drift. These types of shows are an awful lot of fun, and we will definitely be doing some more things like this. Starship still exists. They're still stacking the tower out there. It's not going anywhere. SN15 and 16, friends back in the not-quite scrapyard. There's your Starship update for the week. Now you know what's going on. Watch the daily videos. I'm still just having a look here because I've got some things I've got to click on as well if we get her calling back in. But in any event, thank y'all so much for the understanding here as I try to fill the dead space. It really is a good time. It's a great episode. Thanks to you all. Let me go through again. I certainly won't be answering any questions that are addressed to Jean, but let me see if there's anything else in the list here I can get. Sean, I see about your mom in there. I'm going to save that one until Jean comes back on. How many people worked in the sewing department? That's a great question, Jam. I'll ask that one as well. Were the thick fabrics layered, or has the thickness multiple inches? Oh, like layered and quilted and batted. Like you'd have a couple different layers, and you'd have like some filling or multiple layers that are sort of added together. That's what she was talking about, those 9-inch needles on that 30 by 30 big quilting machine, the big sewing machine. That's how they would make the thicker pieces of it. So we were talking about that a little bit earlier. I'm just scrolling through, seeing if there's anything else. Hey, appreciate the super chats as well. You'll know when we do special shows like this, we don't spend a lot of time on the super chats, but I still do see them coming through. We want to spend as much time as we can on the guests, but CANP, names Dave, Gary Atano, Gavin Mason, Tony Penfeld, thank you all so much for the super chats and memberships and stuff like that. We do appreciate you there. And I am seeing if we've got this. We may need to... Just 1 second, y'all. We're working on getting her back in. Give me just 1 second. Again, the technical guy also being the guy talking right now. That's me. So... And we're just waiting for her. I think she's dialing back in, and we're waiting for her to dial back in here, y'all. Again, thanks for understanding on this. Not quite seeing it. Let's see if we can bring Chris back over really quickly. Just 1 second. That should be Chris. All right, Chris, you should be back now.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes.
How we doing? Do we think we might get Jean back, or?
Yes, she should be calling back in.
Okay. All right. So we're still working on that, y'all. Again, just internet hiccups that we are dealing with here. They love your background, by the way, Chris. With the
Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine crew, yeah.
Yes.
No, maybe make it happen. Nice. Necessary taco, yeah. Still worth sticking around to watch. Thank you, Grandwig. Thanks for saying that. Oh, here we go. All right, stand by.
Okay, yes, I was going to say, I just see her online, yep.
Yep, just 1 second. Survey says...
Okay, here we go. Here we go.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, we got it.
I am so sorry.
No, Jean, you do not have to apologize at all. 100%. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and nobody wants to deal with technical issues, so thank you so much for putting up with us.
There we go. All righty. You had a question. You had a question.
We have lots of questions. Chris.
Yes.
Jump right back into it.
Yes, we're going to jump right back into it because I know this is the question that people have been waiting for throughout all of this. So you worked with the thermal protection systems with the shuttle. You mentioned the Orion, right? There's a lot of thermal protection system technology that was used during the shuttle that's held over for Orion, for Starliner, that's used on the X-37Bs, which are serviced in the same processing facilities as the orbiters were.
That's true.
But what people really, really wanted to know about is those tiles on Starship. Starship has a completely different thermal protection system.
And
what are your thoughts on this? Yes.
Lay it on us. Lay it on us.
Well, let me tell you, I'm fortunate enough to know, of course, for proprietary reasons, there's some things I can't talk about.
Of course.
They are hexagon shaped. We all know that. They're hexagon shaped. I had my lead engineer, Jeff Andrus, and Martin Wilson, who was the very head of the TPSF, were the program almost from the very beginning. SpaceX lured them away from my building about 3 years ago. So they said they both were interested in challenges. Those are called, what's it called? Bayonet clips is what they call the clips that they put the tile
the
on.
Little studs that are sticking off, or
yeah, they're called bayonet clips.
Okay.
And I was surprised Martin was on the phone with an hour because I had a lot of questions for him, because I tell him anything to do with tile, people naturally think of me, and I want to keep up to date with everything that's going on too.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, well, the thing is with the hexagon shaped, I asked him about the gap fillers between the tiles. He says the way the design is, they don't think they're going to need it. And at the very worst, they're going to have to take, again, that filler bar that I showed you on my blanket right here. At the most, they might have to use that in between the tile.
Okay.
Okay.
But I don't know if I can tell you where they're being made at. You guys probably already know where they're being made at.
Oh, we've seen some smoke coming from some buildings and some equipment's being delivered, you know.
I probably shouldn't, but it's yeah, I won't say.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know they're having robotics. He says they eventually plan on going to robotics. It's very tedious. When we paint a tile, it's like a spray gun that you're using to paint a car. That's exactly what it looks like. They put them on little prongs, but they're trying to keep down costs. And because it's cheaper when you have just one shape. With Shuttle, we had tons of shapes.
Right.
But it keeps the cost down because they're consistent. But they're doing experiments with robotics to have them spray paint their tile to keep the cost down. So that's the one thing I know about that.
It's like assembly line style, like just robots doing everything. Yeah. Interesting.
Temperature-wise, he tells me they're roughly the same what Shuttle could do, which is upwards about 22 to 2300.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're right, they're on certain sides. They do. It's like anything else on Shuttle. They have thermocouples in each one, which are little thermometers that they install, so they get a readout as to what temperature that the tiles are. I think they're kind of fascinating, but they just snap right on. It's a lot easier. They don't plan on using RTV, he says. He doesn't think so. They're just going to use those bayonet clips to keep them on.
All right.
Wow.
So, and I keep asking, he says, Jean, eventually I will get you a tour over there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, Martin, I can't say enough. Martin, from the very beginning, I've been a docent since November of 2011. And Martin has said, you know what? Obviously, things slowed down a lot after Shuttle landed. And he said to me, you got to make people know that we're still here. Let them know we do. So that's why he had no problem with giving me tile, anything I needed. He says, you can get the word out about us. And he says, and you're doing outreach. And like I said, I look at it as legacy. And what I find especially touching is we actually have engineers from SpaceX that will come up to Atlantis, and maybe it's because it's legacy knowledge, but they'll ask me what we did so that they can maybe compare notes with something that they're doing now. So somehow I feel like in a way I'm still giving because I tell them how we did things in our building.
Yeah. And that's the key, right? I mean, because we get this question a lot on our streams, like if you were designing the space shuttle today, what would it look like? And our answer is Starship. I mean, that's what it likely would have evolved to, but just because it didn't live up to its full potential doesn't mean there aren't like the thousands of things that can make it easier for the person trying to do it next, for the company trying to do it next.
Well, that's the smart thing to do is to learn, because there's a massive wealth of experience that folks like yourself have, Jean. I mean, you were there looking at blankets and tiles that came back from space, right? And as exciting as it may be to be a new young engineer, you can learn everything you can in school, but until you've seen lots of tiles and blankets come back from space, you're still going to be missing some like hands-on knowledge, right?
And that's exactly what it is. It's strictly hands-on. Yeah, you're right. There's a certain finesse. Even something as basic as when we would do antenna covers on the shuttle, that film is too thin for us to put it in a machine. We take it all and pre-punch the holes. It's little things like that that you would think they learn a lot. I don't know how they do their things, but again, I was just touched that they felt they could ask me, and I just want to help. I just want to help.
Yeah.
So, and I love SpaceX. People think I work for them, but I've been very proud. I've been very proud of what they do. I mean, extremely proud of what they do.
Yeah, so cool.
It is. And Jean, the last thing I wanted to say isn't even a real like technical question to you. I mean, we didn't even get through half the questions I really wanted to ask you.
I know,
so
because my computer kept going down.
That's
no,
okay.
no.
That's
Not even for that. No, I know we definitely would like to reschedule. Maybe we can look at being actually under Atlantis to do it. But you are a docent at the Atlantis exhibit, and you are a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to know if you have a set day or time that you're there, or something to ask you questions in person.
Well, when they let us come back, because we're still under COVID.
Right.
We haven't been out there in over a year. I'm usually there on Sundays, sometimes on a Friday, sometimes on Sunday, but then I'm there all day. Oh yeah, I see. I'm available for outreach. I see here. I wanted to say one thing. I wanted to say is, and hopefully it's going to happen. I met a lady at Atlantis a couple of years ago. Her name was Elise Maddock, and she writes children's books, and she's a beautiful illustrator. We're this close. We're this close to getting a book. It's already got the dummies. We're looking for a publisher. It's going to be called So Sister, and it talks about all the ladies that worked on the shuttle. That it's a children's book, and she does beautiful. And we've come so far. And you know what's so nice? Jonathan Ward, who wrote Bringing Columbia Home, amongst other books, and Michael Leinbach has already seen the dummies, and they both said they would write a blurb for me.
Yeah.
And we already have the Smithsonian and all the centers where all the shuttles are at. They already said, if the book comes through, we want you to do book signings for us here.
Yeah.
So,
that's amazing.
Anyway.
Because, and you mentioned Mike Leinbach. That's a ringing endorsement. For those of you who do not know, Mike Leinbach was the final space shuttle launch director for the shuttle program. Was the launch director during the Columbia accident, one of the people whose jobs it was to work with the KSC workforce during that period of time. But he earned a lot of respect from a lot of us with his adherence to safety. And he would not, if it blew the launch date, he did not care. Yeah. That vehicle would stay on the ground. Yeah.
And what I love about him, is when we lost Challenger and they put her in a missile silo, and even Michael admits that we wanted to sweep it under the rug. He was adamant. So some people know, some don't, that we have what's left of the 38% that we got of Columbia is on the 16th floor of the vehicle assembly building, that for students who are working on PhD or heats, any type of PhD programs, how re-entering the atmosphere affects things. Michael was insistent, we're not going to bury Columbia. I want people to still learn from her. So I've been fortunate enough to be there a couple of times. Yeah. But Mike is truly a modest man. We had a celebration the August after the program ended, and I went up to Michael and I said, it's such an honor to meet you in person because I see you all the time. So he asked me, what did you do on the shuttle? And I told him, and he goes, you guys are the heroes. The ones that people don't see, you guys are the heroes. And I thought that was so nice to him to say. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to be traveling up north, probably in August. And so I'm hoping to maybe book some places to talk to while I'm up there. And Chris knows that I'm a photographer for Space Up Close. Yep. So anyway, so I try and keep it going. I've always, like I said, loved the space program. And even though I'm almost 66, it's been something I've always wanted to do. And I'm fortunate that I'm still able to do this. I really am. Yeah.
Well, and telling those untold stories of all the things that people don't see that goes into getting a vehicle ready to not just leave the planet, but bring people back to the planet safely it's incredible. Everything that goes on that we just never know about. Thank you so much, Jean. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
I was so honored to be in a very small part, but so honored. Yeah. So anyway,
it's just one of the most important things, right?
Say goodbye.
Oh, the trolls, yes.
They're saying goodbye.
Yes, everybody, the trolls and
everything. All right. That's all right. We're saying goodbye. They say goodbye.
It is one of the most important things because, especially that you're working on a children's book, we get people and they're like, oh, I don't like math enough to be a rocket scientist, or, oh, I'm not an engineer, I don't have that mindset. And getting to space and getting humans to space takes all types of different skill sets, and you are a living testament to that. It's not just, oh, I'm a big rocket engineer, right? There are tons of different things that are important, and there are lots of ways that you can contribute, right?
And I'm glad you said that, because with kids especially, I wasn't I wasn't interested in math and science. I'm artistic. I'm a right brain person to the max. And we sometimes would butt heads with our engineers because we would look at things differently. They would ask us to hem their pants for us because they kind of downplayed that we were the women. Yeah. But when I speak, I especially want to talk to kids because I said, you know what? I'm thinking, okay, math and science, okay. But I said, we need creative people. We need people who know how to write and we need people know how to draw plans. We know people who know how to sew. I said, it's all hand. People don't talk enough about the hand stuff. And what I do sometimes when I do my outreach, I get little pieces of my beta cloth from the payload that I have, because I have some from 3 different shuttles. And I pass out little squares of fabrics to the kids that I talk to. And I always tell them, this fabric danced among the stars, and someday you will too.
No.
So I just want everybody to know that it's reachable. I mean, and I know it's cliche to say if you want it bad enough, but I truly, I'm going to start crying. I truly wanted to be out there.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be.
Yep.
So, and I was. So.
Well, Jean, thank you so much for spending your time today with us. Your stories are fantastic. I have a folder filled with images that we couldn't even get to. There's so many different stories that you have. And I continue to urge people, best of luck with your book. If you get that going, folks, check that out. Even if it's a kid's book, you'll still probably enjoy it. You probably have kids. If you have a chance to be on the space.
I want to talk. That's how I want to encourage. Yeah. I want to encourage them.
Yep,
yes.
Absolutely. But if you're around the Space Coast, you might be very, very lucky to catch Jean at one of the places where she does outreach. Not back to KSCVC yet, but you were at the American Space Museum, I think, earlier.
On occasion, yeah.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say this, but, and I do this. Sometimes I can still go out there now, not officially as a docent, but sometimes people who are space hipsters will call and say, I'm going to be here at the Space Center. Can you give me a special tour? And 9 times out of 10, if I'm not doing anything that day, I will, because I love talking about my ladies. That's what I call my shuttles, are my ladies. And I bring my little pointer and I always point out everything that we made for her. So I love doing that.
Excellent. That would be a really good NSF meetup at some point, Chris. Have some special guests in person do that. So
yes.
In any event, we never get to all the different stories. We never get to all the questions. Jean, one more time, thank you so much for working with us with the technical difficulties today. It was fantastic. Every single person. I was reading chat, like while you were disconnected, I was reading chat, and every single person in chat was like, no way, this is worth staying for. No problems on the technical problems. We're staying around because we want to hear more stories from Jean. So
thanks.
Don't fret.
I'll come back anytime you want to.
That's fantastic. So Tuesday, how are you doing? No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys made this very easy. Thank you.
Good deal. We always have a lot of fun with these sorts of shows. We don't have scripts and, we need you to, here are 10 questions we'll ask or anything like that. We're just space nerds hanging out. You could have picked pictures all hanging out on a couch or something like that, just talking about things that we're passionate about. And you definitely have conveyed your passion for the shuttle program and the space program and everything that you contributed. So,
well, if anybody wants to, maybe I'm biting off too much I can chew. If they find me on Facebook, I'm there, and I'll answer questions. If they want to message me, I'll answer questions if they want. Okay, and hopefully we'll be able to do outreach again once the public allows that. I love doing that. Believe it or not, this was a kid when I was little. I hated giving reports or speaking in front of people. Yep. Now it's because I know I've been so lucky to be a part of it. I love getting on the stage and talking about it. Yep. I just do. It's easy.
You've got a life's experience to share now, so.
Yeah.
Excellent. So that's a great final question. How can people support what you do? I mean, you said you're on Facebook. Is there any other way that people can find you and support your outreach? Should they support the museum or something like that? What can they do to help?
We sell pictures. I also, I make, I've got masks and I make shirts and I make lanyards and I make bags and people, I have a site called Sew Sisters. Am I gone? Am I here still?
Yes.
Sew Sister Space Creations on Facebook if they want me to make anything for them. But I was going to pull out one of my official patches here. I have a bag of them, but anyway. So there we go. There's my official Sew Sister patch. And the five gold stars represents each of the shuttles. So that's our official patch that we have. But if they could support, like I said, we do travel and give talks, sell our pictures on Space Up Close or Facebook. But my business is Sew Sister Space Creations if they want to do that. And sometimes if they want to donate, they don't have to, whatever. But Anyway, I love to talk because I just love to talk. I'm just proud of what I did.
Yeah, I think we got the right thing here. I linked this up in chat, but here's So Sister Space Creations, and it's got your patch on it. That's your Facebook page, it looks like. And I've just linked that in chat. Folks, if you're on Facebook, go and check that out. Was there a website or something I could link to, Jean? Beyond this, or just this is a place to go?
Oh, for Space Up Close.
Space
if
Up
you
Close.
want to go to Space Up Close, yeah.
Okay, yeah, let me get that one as well. Again, I want people to be able to support what you do because I know, we have tons of fun doing this stuff, but there's got to be able to do it. There's expenses and stuff involved.
Yeah, well, that is very kind of you to ask. Thank you.
I will always do that. So here is spaceupclose.com is the correct place, right? And I will link that as well. Right there. That's me in chat, y'all, posting that link up. And there, IQ, thank you for putting that link. And there's that. I'm just putting the link out to all the chat so people can click on that. They can figure out where they can find you. And how cool would it be to have something sewn by someone who also sewed things for the space shuttle, right?
Right?
Here's a lanyard, and everything that I make has a piece of flown payload bay fabric. And the only hard question is to ask is if you want it from Columbia, Discovery, or Endeavour, because that's the only shuttles I have. The only shuttles I have, because I even have a tie here. There's the front of the tie, but it's got a piece of fabric. So everything that I make, if people want it, I put a piece of flown fabric on the back.
No kidding.
So,
that is. Folks, the links that I put in chat, make sure you go to those links. Make sure you support Jean. Jean, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Again, I cannot say thank you enough.
All right, thanks a lot. And this has really been fun. And it's an honor that you guys even asked me to be on. So thank you. Thank you.
I'm so happy you agreed to be on, and I can't wait to talk with you more. And after COVID's done, to have that talk underneath Atlantis.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I would love to do that. I can't wait to do that. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Chris,
All right.
anything else? I mean, there's so many pictures. I mean, you cut fabric from the Wright flyer that went to the moon. We didn't even get to that. Jeez.
We didn't even get to that.
Can you just quickly pop that out?
Of course I
You
can.
throw that on.
I can do whatever you want me to. I'm in charge here.
Yeah.
Like, I can click on all sorts of stuff. That was Wright Brothers fabric. Here we go.
Yes.
So here, tell us this real quick.
Okay. I met Mark Armstrong a number of years ago at a space function. And of course, when they had the 50th anniversary of Shuttle and the new movie of Neil Armstrong, his dad, coming out, I got a call from a place down. Anyway, they wanted me.
You're good.
Okay, they wanted me to prepare the fabric for auction because the Armstrong family was going to be, auctioning the fabric. So Mark had called me up one day and said, "You were the first person I thought of." And anyway, long story short, they had me go down to cut the fabric and get it ready for auction. But that was what his father took on the moon. That he took it in his PPK, his personal preference kit, and the fabric was it's called Pride of the West. It's a cotton, and it was very expensive for back then. The ladies used to use it for their undergarments. It was that expensive, and a finely woven cotton that they used back then. But as you can tell, it went through a lot. After the plane got destroyed and they took it back to Dayton, they stuck it in a shed for like years, and then Dayton had a flood, so it has rot on the fabric and everything was wrong. It was tough cutting some of it because it was very, very fragile, but I was just honored that he asked me to do it, because I think that's probably one of the highlights of my life after working on Shuttle, was being asked by Mark Armstrong to cut fabric that went to the moon. I literally cried when they put the fabric on the table. I joke it looks like the shape of Ohio, because that's where Armstrong's from. But no, he said, "You were the first person I thought of to do that for our family," and that's an honor. That was an honor.
That really is. Gosh. It's, again, we could probably be live here for 5 or 6 hours and we would not run out of stories.
Oh my gosh.
I may run out of pictures.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course. It's just there's so many great stories and stuff like that. But that is going to bring us to the end of our show today. Again, y'all, Jean Wright, one of the So sisters, like we said, original So sister, worked on the thermal protection systems for the space shuttle, does space outreach today. Jean, cannot say thank you enough for sharing your experiences with us today.
Thank you.
Gosh.
Thanks.
Yeah. Make sure you head over to those websites, spaceupclose.com. I'll link them again in chat, and then the Facebook page for the So sisters, and go check those out as well. Also on the show today, Chris Gebhardt. Chris, thank you for helping us hold it down.
This was one of my favorite shows. I don't even feel like this was an interview.
Chris.
I felt like we just talked.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Chris, and I've already told this to Dawson when we did our sound check. I said, you know what? I'm amazed whenever you do your live show. I just have to stand next to you because my jaw drops because I said the man's amazing. He knows so much. You know so much.
Well, then I'm going to read out one super chat that came in because we had one comment that said, here's just a friendly reminder that Chris's mouth has exceeded the jaw-dropping to drooling limit for today as the stories that you were telling. Like, I think my jaw dropped so many times that someone caught it. I appreciate that, yes.
Oh,
I got
that's funny.
the situation where my face hurts because I've had so much time in my cheekbones from laughing and grinning with y'all today. Like, I need to work these muscles out more, I guess. But that is going to be the end of our show here today. NASA Spaceflight viewers, thank you so much for watching. Again, we do NASA Spaceflight live every Saturday, just about every Saturday, unless it conflicts with a launch or some big event or something like that. Sometimes we do space news. Sometimes we get special guests. This is one of the most fantastic shows we've had. Hearing stories like this. I guarantee y'all Starship is still there. It's not going anywhere.
Yes.
We'll get you more video with Starship. It's fine, okay? But for now, the NASA Spaceflight crew with our special guest, Jean Wright, will be signing off today's NASA Spaceflight Live, and we will see you nerds later. Jean, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Gene.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye.
And here we go.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly!
Echo Delta nominal.
Flight down, speed off. Say again, speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.